Hi, my name is Johnson Artur. I'm an artist and I run what I call an archive. I call it Black Balloon Archive, and it's an archive that explores the life and presence of the African diaspora.
So, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Priyesh Mistry. I'm the Associate Curator for Contemporary Projects here at the National Gallery. And it's a pleasure to see you all here for the next in our series of Unexpected View talks. For those of you who've come for these talks before, you might remember that this is a series where we invite an artist working today to come and choose a painting from the gallery's collection and to talk about that work and explore some of its themes, the ideas, through their own work as well. Not only to be able to allow us to reflect back on the National Gallery's painting in a different way, but also to explore the different ways that artists are working today. I'm really pleased this evening because we're joined by Johnson Artur, a fantastic photographer, and I've been an admirer of Liz's work for a few years now, and I feel it's a real honor to have her join us. In front of this remarkable painting, Edgar Degas, Miss Lala at the Cirque Fernando. It's quite an iconic painting, and it's going to be a really interesting conversation to be able to explore the work with Liz today. Before I continue, I think we should thank Hiscox as the gallery's contemporary art partner for their support of this evening and for the series. So I'm really delighted that Liz has accepted our invitation to speak this evening. She's chosen this work by Degas in the collection, and we'll go into why we came to that choice at the beginning of our conversation. It's a work that's become iconic not only because it's quite an incredible and quite radical way of perspective and use of approaching a subject like this at this moment where Degas was really experimenting and pushing with ideas around perspective in his work, capturing all of these kind of aspects of modern life. But it's also one of the few portraits that we have in the gallery's collection where we have an identifiable black sitter. So where we know the identity of the sitter within the painting, and this is because Degas titled the painting Miss Lala. I'm going to now introduce Liz more formally. Liz Johnson Artur is a Russian-Ghanaian photographer based in London since 1991. For the last 25 years, she has been working on the photographic representation of people of African descent around the world, amassing an incredible archive of images from which she makes selections and groupings to present them in various categories and themes, also through a range of different forms to make these quite incredible sculptural installations that you enter and explore and embody the space. And the idea is that you can engage with these kind of this body of work, these images, and this archive in a sort of very multi-layered way. Liz has exhibited internationally, including grouping exhibitions at the Photographers Gallery here in London, the Kunstverein in Leipzig, and the 10th Berlin Biennial in Germany, which is where I first saw your work, Liz. Her recent solo exhibitions include Dusha at the Brooklyn Museum in New York in 2019. If You Know the Beginning, The End Is No Trouble at the South London Gallery, also in 2019. And Of Life, of Love, of Sex, of Movement, of Hope at Foam, which is the Photographic Museum in Amsterdam last year. Liz was also awarded the Women in Motion Award at the 52nd edition of Rencontre d'Arles in July last year. And she has just published a book with Tate, which we have a copy here, and we will circulate copies as well. And I hope you'll be able to kind of, if you love the book, you should go out and buy it at reputable booksellers and at Tate's bookshop as well, titled Time Don't Run Here, which I hope we'll get a chance to also explore as well. So without further ado, please join me in thanking Liz and welcoming Liz to the So, Liz, I always start these conversations by asking why and how we came to choose this painting for the conversation today. But also, I wanted to add to that question to say, well, how did you also approach the painting once we'd made that selection?
Well, I got an email from you asking if I wanted to choose a painting, and I was in Paris at the time, and for me it was quite interesting because I thought National Gallery, I don't know if I've ever been there. I've been in London for 30 years, and I've come to Trafalgar Square so many times, but I don't actually walk in here. Ignorance, whatever. So yeah, I said yes, I come, and I think when we came here, I was determined to find my own painting. But you talked about this painting, so I was like, you know. But when I saw it, I was like, there's no other way. I have to choose this one.
Yeah.
And I think it's because I have a picture that works with this one so well, I couldn't resist. And yeah, I kind of brought it here because I think for me, being asked to do something like this is being asked to look at something in a way that I have to make my own. And I think what I mean by that is that I'm no expert on painting, but I can look at paintings and I can also use the tool that I use to investigate things, which is a camera. So when I had a private walk through the whole gallery, which was the experience of a lifetime. But yes, so I took my camera with me and took pictures because I thought that's, for me, the first step to get close to something that I don't know. And I think my approach was very much how I approach when I do my work, is to, what you do when you take pictures is you break things down. That's how I call it. And I think it's because sometimes the things that I see, they're so big that I just don't know where to start. So I start taking pictures. And in this case, I thought, I want to take this picture apart because I have a photograph that really goes well with it, which I'm going to take apart and then see what happens if I put the parts together. Very simple. I had no ambitions in trying to make any kind of artistic statement. It's just trying to do it my way. I think that's what I try to do.
And what I find really, well, there's a couple of things in that initial conversation because when I joined the gallery, and I work on contemporary projects, so it's interesting for me to enter this arena where the kind of language around old master paintings is slightly different from the way that I might talk about contemporary paintings. It's interesting that my colleagues described and called the paintings pictures. We called the paintings, the galleries, pictures. And there's something interesting in the way that we started talking about Degas' painting and remarking on this idea that actually we're looking at pictures. And there's something interesting in the exercise that you've done, the way of kind of processing the image, because you printed and the image that you've taken, fragmented them, but printed them on a material. So suddenly they become a sort of object. You know, I understand paintings as objects as well as the image. You know, so there's this idea of taking a picture, taking an image, but then sort of understanding it through another material. Do you want to describe a little bit about what you've done? And we've had the example on the table, so I recommend that everybody come and have a look at it after the talk. Could you describe the other image that you've kind of paired it with and the materials that you've used?
Yeah, I think in terms of materials, again, I have to go back to making things my own. And for me, the idea of making things my own is that I want to touch things. It's a kind of, you know, even if it's something that I see and I can't reach, but I still want to touch it. And I think that's something that I've brought into my work by printing. I think photography and printing came hand in hand for me. And I did it very classic in the dark room over many, many years. Then suddenly I didn't have a dark room. I had to work something else out. But for me, it's always been important to print my work. And in that process, things happen. Because when you print, the print might have its own surface. I might be able to put something on the surface of the print. You know, it's a process, and I think the process is what really keeps me, in a certain way, doing what I'm doing. And I think it's what got me into here, because I thought I need to find a process, to make it, you know, simple. And breaking down things for me is something that I find quite intriguing, because I think that it's something that, for me, in real time, is a lot of times difficult. You know, I can do my things in my own time, but outside there's a time that is always ticking. Yeah. And I feel that by being able in my work to break things down, I have my own way of dealing with time. Yeah. And time is, for a photographer, an important thing. You know, without time, you have problems taking a picture. So all these ideas came into me. I wanted to break it down. The first thing that came to me when I saw this picture is I saw the picture that I took of Grace Jones. And to be honest, when I looked at the picture, when you said this is a black performer, that's when I saw it. It's not necessarily something I would have recognized straight away. But, you know, the picture that I have of Grace Jones is, in a certain way, a similar perspective. I was in a similar place. I was in the audience, and suddenly she came closer, you know? And it was really this thing of, I wanted that picture. I'm going to tell you why Grace Jones means a lot. But just to give you the idea, I didn't know what Degas felt when he wanted this perspective, but I know what it feels like when you want a picture and you are down there. And so I got this picture without knowing anything about this painting. But I thought, okay, I have something that I can put together. And I broke down the Grace Jones photograph as well, and I just put them next to each other. I used different surfaces because I think in this particular case, I like to work with surfaces, but as I mentioned earlier, I like the idea of not so much injuring things, but giving them some kind of texture, life. Yeah. And the stories that you told me about these paintings that have been injured because someone shot at it or someone scratched it, for me that's very exciting. So I thought I need something of that in it as well. So I used material that has, you know, it leaves marks. So that was another process that was important here. And I think, in a way, I chose this painting because I thought that gives me a chance to talk about Grace Jones in the National Gallery. I think that is not a bad place to be. Yeah. So you will hear about her.
That's great. Thank you. I've always wanted to talk about Grace Jones in the gallery. This is perfect.
You know, why not?
It's interesting to hear you talk about time, and particularly, you know, in terms of there's this instant idea that, you know, when you take an image, it's a very quick process. You know, you see something, you point, you shoot, and you capture it. There's something interesting about, you know, Degas working in this way, you know, at that time of the advent of popular photography, you know, where actually, and Degas also took pictures, you know, he also had a camera in the 1880s, he was also taking his own images as well. And there's something interesting about that relationship to painting, where here he actually, you know, produced this image over a short engagement with the circus and with Miss Lala. He, I think, over a short period of time, over 4 days, went to see Miss Lala time and again to understand actually what kind of painting he wanted to make. And he was quite, seeing from his sketches that he made, he was very certain about the perspective and the composition. You know, he was quite innovative in the way that he wanted to approach the subject. And I think, you know, looking at the painting, it's very interesting to see that actually he's focusing on one, you know, on a particular perspective, not necessarily thinking of Miss Lala as a portrait, but of her, what she stands for within this space, within the kind of circus, but also the environment of what it's at. And then, so there's the kind of idea of the instant, the capturing of this kind of moment. But then to contrast that, I wanted to talk to you about the archive, the Black Balloon Archive, which is what you called the kind of body of material that you've kind of amassed over 25 years, and the time and the idea of kind of accumulating over time. Could you talk a little bit about the idea of practicing over that time, but just accumulating images, making images, understanding or approaching the way that you approach the subjects, the communities, the African diaspora around the world, what it means to kind of collect those images in a way?
I think the first thing I would have to say is that there's not much more behind it than just doing it. Because I think, you know, you don't predict 25 or 30 years. And I definitely didn't start thinking I'm going to stretch this forever. But I think what there is that, for me, engagement, whether it's the engagement of getting to places, meeting people, getting photographs, coming back home, trying to deal with all the photographs that I have. And over this stretch of time, I think what I developed is simply to engage with the work, so that I don't go out and just compulsively take pictures and hoard them. For me, every time I go out, I also know when I come back, I want to see the picture. And I work on film, so I have to go through a process to see my pictures. And that's the process that, for me, is, in a way, the most exciting one, because taking a picture, I don't see what picture I take, but in the process, things can happen. Something comes out that actually I'm not quite sure what I will get. So all these things keep me in the game, as I say. You know, it's like, as long as I have that, as long as I don't go out and know exactly what I get, I'll be going out and looking for it. And I think that's sort of how I, in a rough way, run my archive. Archive, because I think it's like, I love archives, you know, I like, wherever I am, I try to go to an archive. I want to see what is important for whoever, but to just see this idea of keeping something safe. And I think because of accumulating photographs, but at the same time also wanting to make a point that each photograph matters, you have to find a way of dealing with that, you know. And although I don't shoot digital, I still have a lot of photographs to deal with. And I have to say, I call them photographs. I don't call them pictures or images, which is, for me, the fast food side of photography. So, you know, I try to keep it special. And also, it's part of how I arrange my life. You know, my work is in my home, has always been there. It's always something I can reach for whatever reason, and I think it helps me to engage with things. I mean, this is a good example for that, because in a certain way, I start with a photograph, whether I go out and take it, whether I take a photograph of a photograph, whatever it takes, I want to end up with a process that maybe lets me look at something that I wouldn't see if I would just have one picture. So I think it's also the idea of creating narratives. I think that's one of the things that I'm very interested in. And I think for me, being attracted to, or, you know, working a lot with my eyes, I guess that's the kind of stories I want to tell, that you can read, but it doesn't mean that all other senses are not involved. You know, I wouldn't say smelling, well, sometimes smelling comes into it as well, you know. I think it's, I guess also to make people understand, and that's how I show my work, is that, yes, it's photography, but photography has a very interesting life if you let it be. Whether it's a print that gets old, whether it's a negative that can get scratched, all these things are things that, for me, are a lifeline to keep going in a certain way, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think there's something really wonderful to hear you talk about, that kind of materiality of the photographs. And there's a kind of twofold question in a way that I wanted to ask you next about. One is that kind of moment of taking the photograph. We just talked a little bit about perspective and, you know, the idea of kind of framing a shot. or framing, you know, the way that Degas would have approached this image of looking upwards. So I wanted to talk to you a little. I want to ask about how you might approach that when you're, you know, in a situation where you are taking photographs, but then also about then the moment of display. So you have these kind of these photographs, these the collection, the archive, and then the selection process that you go through in order to then take some of these images and process them into different materials or group them together in different ways. Is that too much of a leap between the two? But maybe we could start with this idea of taking photographs when you're, what do you kind of look out for, or what are you kind of thinking about?
Okay, why don't we talk about Lala in connection to the photograph that I have? Because I think one of the things about why I was glad that it fitted my work was because I remember taking this picture. You know, I've been taking a lot of pictures and I like to think that I remember every moment. But this in particular I remember because I was in a place where I didn't think I would get this picture. But at some point she was coming towards me and I thought I can try. And so it was a real effort to get this picture, and still I didn't know if I had it till I went, processed the film, and then suddenly saw I've got it. And I think what it is that, I don't know if there's photographers in this room, but I don't know if taking pictures is a matter of what do you think about. I think for me, I jump in, you know, it's like going swimming. If I'm in the right place, I jump in and I see what can happen. But I think there is something for me that is always open when I take pictures, which means I like to keep a space that I will discover once I see the photograph. So I think that for me, that's in a certain way something where I always keep a little bit of space unknown, which is not easy in, you know, when you do something for so long, but somehow I guess also allowing for things to happen, mistakes, you know. I don't want to say losing, but actually I lost once a negative and then I found it again. And that was another life, you know. So all kinds of things can happen. And I say this because my work is very close to me. Yeah. So all these things can happen. And I think that's a good setup for me to work. That I can reach things. If I have an idea, then I can, I can go out and do it.
And so do some of these ideas about, you know, being kind of close to the images, being able to kind of use them or reflect on them afterwards, how do they kind of then come into the presentation? So what's the process of selecting the images, deciding how they might, what form they might take, whether it's being printed on a different material or if it's hanging loosely in the space within a kind of cloth book, or if it's shown on the wall, projected?
I have to say all these things really never mattered because for all this time, only in the last few years, I had to deal with showing my work. I had the big pleasure to just work on my own. I didn't have to think how to show it, what to show it. And what came out of that was that I worked mainly in books. So I made books. I made books obsessively because the more pictures I had, the more books I needed to make. So that was my process of working with it. When suddenly people said, oh, do you want a room? I thought, okay, I get a room. So I have to think of space, because my space was always pages, you know, it was always things that were very much, and I think that's why I got so much into surface, because a lot of times it was the only place to go, is to go on the surface. But I think now, when I started showing my work, questions start coming. You see, that's the thing, you know, you show your work, they want to know why this, why that. There's not always an answer to that. There can't be, because how could I do what I do if I always have an answer for it? A lot of these things that I do are questions. Yeah. And I don't even know how, you know, I don't even know if I need them answered, but I need to make them. I need to kind of like, I think it sounds a little bit blasé, but I think anyone who does something and doesn't stop doing it, although it seems like you don't go anywhere, might know what I'm talking about. You know, I think it's the engagement I have to repeat because, you know, for me, my work has always been a lifeline. You know, a lifeline to explore things, to question things. I don't actually deal with answers, so my work is not about answering questions.
What I find, this is lovely to hear you talk about it in this way, and I think what I really enjoy about seeing your work, particularly in these installations, is the great feeling of joy and excitement in what images can do. So and I think, you know, I feel that your work is almost like a proposition to suggest that actually this is the potential of all of these images. You know, you can understand them, read them, engage with them in different ways. You can feel them in different ways. Which is why I've been a long admirer of your work, Liz. I think there's...
Can I say something? Because it is about my work, but my work consists of me taking pictures of people. So there's a responsibility here that I try to... I need to make that point because my work is photographing other people. In my work, you see other people. So I think my engagement with my work is also trying to keep them safe, you know? So, and when I say safe that's when I had to go out and show or I was asked to show my work, I had to make sure they still safe. And people can't just take and run with them. And I think that's why I suddenly thought about installations, because I thought it's about how you engage with pictures. And if people go along a wall, it might work. I mean, it works with paintings. It works with photographs sometimes as well, but it's sometimes a bit too, you know, too much presented. And a lot of my work is about being allowed in. So I think to show my work, I also want to give people a feeling that they can come in. Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about the book, the very recently, fresh off the press book that was published last week with Tate, and it's a really interesting set of images in the way that you've going back to this idea of returning to the page in a way. What, could you talk a little bit about this as an object, or the selection of images that you made when you took these images? And
I mean, I try in my work not to have themes, but in this case it was a particular occasion and I went out and I took photographs. And I took photographs because for all this time that I've been taking pictures in London, the presence of young black people saying they had enough was very, you know, it was just special. And I felt like it's something that I needed to photograph, but also include in my archive. And when I say include in my archive, I knew that they needed something that makes them sustain, as I like to say, the test of time. So that these pictures are there, and you know, I have to also say that I don't think of an audience, but I do think of the people that are in my pictures. I'd love them to see the pictures. It's not always possible, but if they can, there is a perspective that I want them to see themselves. And everyone else is invited to the party, but you know, I do have a bit of a, but I think what it is that I thought the title comes from simply thinking about time and thinking how to fix a picture for time. And I had these books which were novels by, help me out, Iris Murdoch.
Yeah.
And you know, it was in Braille, it was printed in 1968, and I felt like, why not? I mean, what I saw, what I took pictures of, I considered part of British history, you know? So I think let it sink in. And I work a lot with paper. I also have a kind of idea that all I need to do is symbolically plant something. So for me, the paper was a symbolic kind of idea of planting the idea of a certain time where young people went out and demonstrated. And maybe we only know about them because they were photographed then. So, you know, all these things kind of were in my head, and I printed it on Braille. And I think I printed it on Braille because I thought the Tate acquired some of these prints. And one of the things that I asked for was that it's possible for people to come and actually look at the prints. You know, so I don't know how they're going to do it because public is always difficult. If you come to my studio, I let you touch them. The Tate, I don't know, but yeah. I'm hoping. You know, so I do think of, you know, presenting the work a little bit how I access it and how I keep it.
Yeah. I think this is an interesting point to kind of reflect back on Degas' Miss Lala, in the way that, you know, we've recognized that this isn't a portrait of Miss Lala. You know, he's not showing Miss Lala's face, he's not showing her as he might have done when he was in that period of painting portraits of people. You know, he's very much thinking about Miss Lala in her strength and in the way that she is this kind of circus performer, you know, in the fate that she can achieve by, you know, so Miss Lala was known for doing this kind of spectacular act of holding herself up just by gripping a piece of rope between her teeth. There was another act where she was, apparently with her strength, she held a cannon suspended from a chain that was then fired. So she was kind of suspended upside down. So this great act of kind of, this miraculous act in a way. And so Degas kind of choosing to portray that rather than the figure. And it's interesting, we kind of reflected on it before, the only way we know that it's Miss Lala is because he chose to put her name in the title. So it's a sort of non-portrait in a way, something that's between fiction and sort of a fantasy. We can talk a little bit about that with Grace Jones as well, and the photograph that you took. But it's this idea that that actually the only the reason why we remember Miss Lala today is actually because of this painting. So perhaps not really what Degas was intending when he was making the painting. You know, one, to be really radical, quite innovative in the way that he was choosing this perspective and this view on the circus and that event. But also, he's given us a sort of memory of who Miss Lala was.
I mean, to bring in Grace Jones, because, you know, otherwise I haven't done my job right. It's a depiction of a black woman, and I think that's what interested me as well, because, you know, the picture that I have of Grace Jones is similar, and, you know, in a certain way, how she is known is very similar. You know, she's known for being physical, manly, but also she, you know, I say this because when I was a young teenager in Germany, Grace Jones appeared suddenly on the scene, and it was a big deal for me, you know, because there was nothing else like this out there. And you know, I've loved since then her as an artist, but there was something also that followed her, that she was made by a man in terms of her artistic output, that she can't really sing, and that she's very, yes, I don't know, I mean, stronger than any man, that kind of thing, you know? And the moment when I saw her, and particularly when I saw the picture, I could see her elegance. I could hear that she could sing, you know, and I had to say to myself, I've been believing this shit, excuse me, because that's what it is. And I think whatever Miss Lala stands for, the representation of black women in this time, but still in our time, is very questioning for me, you know. So I think in that sense, I wanted to make that point here, because I think she's represented here, but she's represented as a body. And when you look at the sketches, all these sketches that he did, he never bothered about her. And I'm not saying that makes the painting bad. All I'm saying is sometimes you pick what you pick because you have that perspective. And for me, having this parallel to Grace Jones, to someone who is represented in our time, and yes, she represents black women. And I don't think, you know, it's something that it's something that needs to be questioned. So I question that in my archive, definitely. And I think that's why I chose this painting, so I can make this.
Brilliant. I think that's a perfect note to end, Liz. So please join me in thanking Liz for her talk today.